Welcome back to Pistons Intellect, your home for the most informed Detroit Pistons news and analysis. I'm your host, Jack Kelly. You can follow me on Twitter at Jack_Kelly_313. And today we're going to be talking about the Detroit Pistons 103-107 loss to a Nuggets team that was missing a number of key players. This is now the Pistons' 12th straight loss. They are 2-13 on the season. We are pretty much 4 weeks into the NBA season, and the Pistons last won a game, I believe, on the first week wasn't even over. So we are quickly approaching 3 weeks without a win, maybe even more. And that was a tough one. For those that might not have been watching, the Pistons started well in this game. Jaden Ivey once again got the start, even with Killian Hayes back in the lineup. And I'm going to get to him and Cade in a minute because I think they were one of the bright spots in the game. But the Pistons started well, but Coach Michael Malone from the Nuggets, he got ejected, I believe, with a few minutes to go in the first quarter. Then probably a quarter later, towards the end of the first half, Nikola Jokic gets thrown out. And honestly, the Nuggets were also on the second night of a back-to-back. They were coming off a loss to the Cavs and just didn't look like, at least Jokic, he didn't care. I don't know if he wanted to be there. He started the game well. Look, the Pistons were keeping it close, but the Nuggets were also and have also been without their second best player in Jamal Murray for at least a week, I can think. So they were already depleted. Then they lose the best player in the world in Jokic. They lose a championship coach in Michael Malone. And then, so now we're thinking at the half, all right, the Pistons dropped this. It just felt like they couldn't lose this game. No matter how many injuries the Pistons had, Pistons still had their best player in Cade Cunningham. The Nuggets were without their three key pillars, arguably, of their organization, at least on the court. And the Pistons somehow find a way to lose this one. I believe they were up by around 3 points in the last 5 minutes of the game, maybe even the last 3 minutes of the game. And yeah, they just find a way to lose. And I don't even know. Like I was just watching the game. And like I said in the last episode, like I've gotten back to this point now where the losses are it's inevitable. Like I just find it funny. Like I was, watching the game back last night. Like obviously I knew they were going to lose, but I mean, even checking the box scores throughout the day, like just watching it on my phone at times, like you just don't feel like they're going to win. And that, like I mentioned in my last episode, that's like kind of the scary thing right now is like, how much is this losing streak? How much has it now become a mental thing? Because the Denver Nuggets, as good of a team as they are, you know, they started the season really hot, but they've dropped a few games. They were coming off a big loss to the Cavs. The Cavs are also still without Donovan Mitchell. Like they were beatable. That was a very, very winnable game. The Pistons should have won that game, I feel confident in saying, especially once Jokic went out. Like that is a must-win game. And they still can't close the deal. And to make matters worse, the Nuggets were led by a pair of former Pistons who each dropped 20 points in Reggie Jackson and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Kentavious made a number of key steals, 2 in particular on Cade, and it was just, it sounds unbelievable, but the Pistons drop another one. And I'm going to get into some lineup stuff in a minute, but I think just this first part just needs to be a bit of another venting session because in a vacuum, you lose to defending champs, doesn't matter. Like normally would, if you had told me before the game, the Pistons are going to lose this. If they went on a 12-game losing streak, 11-game losing streak, I wouldn't mind. But when you've lost this many games in a row, it's just every game. It just doesn't even feel like, it doesn't matter who the Pistons play right now. Like they just need to win. And they were a lot more competitive last night, and there were some positives, but just down the stretch once again, and this is on Cade, this is on everyone. It's on Monty Williams. They just can't close out games. And some of that's to do with lineups, some of that's to do with turnovers, some of that's to do with inexperience, but it's a mess. It's a mess right now. And it's honestly like, I haven't seen this level of national attention that the Pistons have drawn recently in season since I've been a fan in the past decade. Like, the Pistons are obviously an afterthought. The only time they've been relevant recently is around June, July in free agency in the draft, and then maybe the first week of the season. Then no one cares because they're always in the bottom of the standings, or they're fighting in the 8th, 10th slot. Like, there's just never a reason to really cover this team from a national perspective in the past decade to 15 years. But I have seen multiple outlets talking about the Pistons. ESPN, The Ringer put out an article on Cade yesterday about how he's probably not a number one option. I don't 100% agree with it, but I think it's valid right now. There's national podcasts I listen to, they're talking about the Pistons and what is going on there. And that, in fairness, they are not as totally alarmed, but the fact they're talking about the Jaden Ivey thing and why was he coming off the bench, it just makes no sense. Like, there's genuine confusion from a national perspective about this team, and it's justified. And this feels like it's getting to a point where, and I spoke about it last episode, and I hate to repeat myself, but it just feels like something has to give. I alluded to maybe a trade, but a trade's probably not going to happen for at least the next 3 weeks. So whether, I don't like talking about people's jobs in the front office and coaching and whatever, but it just feels like something has to give. You cannot come out in your 4th season of restoration. I mean, technically it's the 5th, but in terms of this regime, it's the 4th, the Troy Weaver era. You cannot come out and be 2-13. And I think the disheartening thing is today, James Edwards from The Athletic detailed a really nice piece titled, "Is Troy Weaver on the Hot Seat?" And James writes in there, "It is my understanding that ownership, while they'd obviously like to win more games, aren't dismissing the cards Weaver and co have been dealt," alluding to the injuries. And that isn't the organization saying it. That's James and his sources. And like, James does amazing work and is extremely well connected to the Pistons organization. So I just, like, come on. I know the Pistons aren't saying that, but I know James is extremely well connected. And for him, like, it's just, I don't know. I'm not saying Troy Weaver should be fired, but this is like, I don't know. It makes sense logically that the Pistons are struggling so much with their injuries. But then at the same time, it's like, why? Like, I didn't mind the offseason sort of moves they made. But obviously I was wrong. But I also didn't expect them to be injured like this. But it's just, maybe I'm just being impatient. But I just, yeah. Like, forcing change for the sake of change is not normally the right reason to do something. But this, yeah, man, I don't know. I'm struggling. I'm just rambling now, but I'm struggling to be really positive. I'm going to get into some positives in a minute, but when I just zoom out right now, I'm just like, I don't know. This is tough. So, yeah, the Pistons now lost 12 straight. They play again on Friday night in Indiana against the league's best offense, against a team with Tyrese Halliburton, who's averaging 24 a game, 11 assists on 50-49 shooting. A team that has great rim protection, at least with Miles Turner. So a team that I feel like Detroit has struggled to beat in their own building when they're healthy. They did have a win at the end of last season, but yeah, the Pacers seem to normally get a hold of Detroit in their home arena. So, I mean, all eyes, it feels like, are going to be on next Tuesday's game against the Wizards. I feel like if the Pistons get to that point, and I almost don't even want to say this, but if they lose to the Washington Wizards and they are on a 14-game losing streak, something has to come from the organization, whether that's a statement, a press conference, or much, much more. But there has to be something, because you cannot leave your fan base out in the lurch like this and just filter out news that the injuries, as much as it is a valid reason, it just isn't cutting the mustard. So that was 9 minutes on, I guess, me just venting. I hope it helped some of you. But I do want to talk about some positives, because as I said, the Pistons lost the game they should have won. How many times have we said that? But the one positive for me last night was watching Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey play off each other. And particularly in the first half, which Nikola Jokic was on the court for most of, Pistons were in the game, they were fighting, they were defending. But with those two in Cade and Jaden Ivey, I really like the way they played off each other, particularly Jaden. Cade kind of has just, he's been a bit inefficient at times, but he kind of played his normal game. But I feel like he had his legs under him a bit more, Cade. And I think you saw that down the stretch. He was able to get to the free throw line. He's able to get into the paint, and he wasn't settling for jumpers as much. And I feel like some of that is because he shared the court with Jaden Ivey for much of his time on the court. And those two were able to, sort of take turns. Jaden, not so much in sort of initiating the offense, but he was able to, take the load off Cade and create opportunities for himself scoring-wise off secondary actions and coming from the weak side and receiving the ball and attacking downhill and getting to the rim. He had a number of nice finishes, Jaden. And just that, I think that release valve for Cade, maybe even just mentally to know he's got this guy that can get to the paint, get to the rim, and get a good shot off. That must just help. That must just help sort of release some pressure on Cade. Just to know there's someone else out there who can get downhill, get to the rim, and just get a good shot. And then they each dished an assist to each other where they both hit a three. Jaden's in particular, he attacked from sort of the right wing, driving left into the paint, drew the help. And Cade must have just been like, what is going on here? Because Cade's man went to help on the Ivy drive, and Cade was wide open for a spot up three, and it was nothing but the bottom of the net. And I haven't seen Cade that wide open in a minute. And especially coming off sort of just Jaden attacking downhill. Like that is why I love those two together offensively, because Jaden can draw help. There's no and that's been my one gripe with Killian and his play style is he just doesn't draw help. He can't. He's really good at getting to that mid-range area and pulling up, but he can never sort of draw the help as much to free up Cade and get him open like Jaden Ivey can. And Jaden Ivey had a number of turnovers last night, but I just feel like those are the flashes that we're clutching on to right now. But that's why we've been pushing for Jaden to be in the starting lineup, just for those moments, those glimpses where he can draw Cade's man and Cade finds himself wide open. And he can allow Cade to play 38 minutes like he did last night and not look completely and utterly gassed come the last 5 minutes of the game. So Jaden finishes with 17 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, and he shot 7 of 8 from the floor. So he was 6 of 7, was 5 of, I think it was 6 of 7 in the first half. So he only took the one shot in the second half, made it. It was a layup attacking downhill, and he got to the free throw line. So I would have liked to have seen Jaden a bit more aggressive in the second half. And I think that's on Jaden. That's also on Cade to find Jaden, and especially it's on Monty Williams to draw up an action to try and get Jaden more involved, because Jaden was having a really good game, an efficient game, and I feel like he could have helped down the stretch a bit more. But really solid game from Jaden. And I think the one thing, this is a very, very small sample size right now, but I just want to bring up the fact that in 45 minutes together in the past 2 games, the game they lost to the Raptors by 30 points, Jaden and Cade, when they're on the floor together, Detroit are a net neutral. So they're giving up 110 points per 100 possessions, but they're also scoring 110 points per possession. So they are neutral, which right now we will take, considering pretty much all the Pistons lineups are negatives right now. So just to see some early, very, very early signs that those two together on the floor is a good thing right now. That is a positive. We will 100% be clutching to that right now. And then I just want to quickly touch on Cade. One of his better games, particularly in the past week and a half. 27 points, 9 assists. Got to the line a ton. I think it was 11 of 11, 2 of 4 from 3, and then 7 from 17 overall. But when you get to the line and you knock down your threes, your efficiency is there. That 40% field goal doesn't matter as much when you get into the free throw line. So he still had some errant turnovers, which was a bit disappointing. A couple in the second half. But I think it was a really good controlled game from Cade. And yeah, just watching him and Ivy play off each other was really encouraging for me, especially that first half. They looked like that yin and yang type combo that I love so much about that pairing. So really, really solid game for them. And I think if there's anything to keep an eye on right now, between now and December 15th, while the Pistons have this roster, it is just praying and watching those two ball out together, because if the Pistons are going to have any shot in winning games, it feels like those two need to be in sync. They need to be scoring. They need to be relatively efficient, and they need to be finding each other and making each other's lives easier. So good game from those two, and something to monitor going forward. Now, the final thing I wanted to touch on in today's show is I'm recording this the day after the Pistons game. So just before jumping into record, the Pistons released an injury update by their PR team. And there was some good news and some bizarre / bad news. So I'll start with the good news first. Jaylen Duran is expected to return to practice this week. So I don't think he will play in the Pacers game, but I would definitely say he will be there for the Wizards game next Tuesday or on Tuesday. And then Bojan Bogdanovic, similar. He's back and cleared for full basketball contact. I feel like he'll be back once again for that Wizards game. Feels like the Pistons are going to make sure they're healthy, because I think that game is as I said, they cannot lose that. So to get those two back is huge. Just before I get to the bizarre bad news, I just want to touch on some lineups and something I want to see once Duran and Bojan are back. After being really big on Stu starting, and I absolutely loved defensively what I saw from Stu and Duran together in the games they played, particularly those first 3 to 4 games. I'm now starting to think, especially after seeing sort of the rebounding ability of Asar carry over immediately to the NBA, I think I am leaning towards bringing Stu off the bench now. And I don't even think it's a demotion. I think for me, once those two are healthy, Bojan and Jaylen Duran, I'm not saying first game back, maybe Bojan needs to come off the bench, get his legs back under him. But once Bojan is 100% or close to, I think you roll out a starting group of Cade, Ivy, Asar, Bojan, and Jaylen Duran. And I think that gives you the best shot at winning right now, because I just don't think I said this in the preseason on the Detroit Bad Boys Live show I used to do. Like, Stu looked really good. He did some really nice things at the 5 in the preseason, especially against backup units. And I think his offensive rebounding stands out a ton when he's going against the backups. Like, just his rebounding overall is much more valuable, and his switchability is much more valuable when he's at the 5. And I've been super encouraged with the things I've seen of him at the 4, but I just don't think there's time in this season now to develop that. And that was always a bit of a long-term play, but I think there's still going to be times for him to develop that at the backup 5 position, because he can be a pick and pop big, pick and pop big, which I know we haven't seen a lot, but he can be that spacing big, and maybe he can still work on those sort of attacking off closeouts, drives, passing. But yeah, I am now starting to be firmly of the belief that Stu should be a first big off the bench. Because not to bash him, but James Wiseman has just not looked up to it. And I know he's not necessarily in the lineup when Durant's healthy, but I just don't think he can be your third big. And I think Stu and Bagley can play decently together, but I still think Bagley, having him solely as your only rebounder or big man on the floor, I just don't think he brings enough defensively and as a rebounder to sort of play him out there with smaller lineups. So I would like to see Stu alongside him, those two coming off the bench being your bigs, and you can mix and match Stu with Duran. But yeah, I'm starting to think you need to space the floor for Cade. You have Boyan in the corner. You have Jaylen Duran as a roll man. You have a non-shooter and a star there, which is a bit of an issue, but he's been too good to keep on, to keep out of the starting group. And his wing defense is just too vital for this team right now. And you also have Ivy. And I want to shout out my man, Wes Davenport, over at Detroit Bad Boys. He was big on that starting group from the off-season, and I think that's what I want to see now, because I think this team just needs to try new lineups. Like, I get the vision with Stu and Duran. Maybe ultimately that's what they land on, but I think you need to try something else. I think you need to get much more shooting out there for Cade. We even saw with Isaiah Livers returning yesterday, just sort of having a four-man that can actually, who isn't hesitant like Stu can be at times with his shot and with his decision-making. Having a four-man like Livers, who played bad yesterday. He made a couple of shots, but it's his first game back. I'm not worried. But he didn't even have a good game. And you just see just the quick decision-making at the four, the spacing, the little bit of gravity Livers had. It just felt like the offense free-flowed a little bit more. And I think if you throw Boyan in there, he's probably the one guy on the Pistons roster who has genuine gravity that defenses will actually scout for each and every night, because he's one of the best shooters in the NBA, period. So I think you have to get Boyan in that starting group, and I think you can't take a Sar out. And I think, unfortunately, that means Stu goes to the bench, but I think Stu can flourish there. I still think he's worth his contract coming off the bench, and I still think he's going to close a lot of games, because him and Duran can do a ton defensively together to disrupt teams. And so that's something I want to see. If not Boyan's first game back, definitely when Boyan's fully fit and ready to go. Stu off the bench just seems to be something I think needs to be tried. But yeah, the final bit of injury news, which was we had a bizarre sequence of events. Monte Morris, after tweeting out he just wants to hoop and that kind of thing, and we were told he was 3 to 4 weeks away in the preseason, that he'd be reevaluated around 4 weeks into the season. Just as we think he's starting to come back, we get told he's had a right quad strain and he's now out. He'll be reevaluated in 6 to 8 weeks. So that's just a reevaluation. It's always important to read that, because that just means to be reevaluated. That's not when he's coming back. That's not when he's back to practice. That is just when they're going to take another look at this. So he could be out for 9, 10, 12 weeks. So we might not even see him until All-Star weekend. And I don't think I've ever seen someone come back before on time of an injury report. So it feels like Monte is not going to be with this team for the foreseeable future. And who knows, he could be traded. I'm not sure what happens, because he's only expiring. I was really looking forward to seeing him with this team, because he was just the souped up version that I feel bad putting him in the same sentence as Corey Joseph, but he was going to be that off guard that you could put alongside Cade, take the pressure off him, low turnovers, hit open threes. At least offensively, it was a match made in heaven in terms of putting a veteran guard next to Cade. But unfortunately, we're not going to see that. I think one of the positives out of this is that the Pistons have Marcus Sasser, who's been inconsistent, but has had some really, really, really good games, particularly a 26-point game against the Bucks. But yeah, that's a bummer. And I mean, just after this injury release was sent to the various media outlets, Monte Morris tweeted out just a blue cap emoji saying cap, which for those that don't mean, cap is like calling someone out on a lie or like something like that. So, and then he immediately deleted it. So I don't know if he's saying where he's referring to the lie or what's misinformation or what's bugging him to send that out. But that is just not a good look for a Pistons PR team, which has been extremely quiet on certain players and not being very transparent at times. To have your player tweet out something alluding to a lie immediately after his injury is reported. I mean, first thing that came to my mind is, are they just sitting him? Like, are they looking to trade him? Like, I don't know why would he say cap? Like, why? That just alludes to someone's lying. There's some misinformation or something's not right. So he deleted that immediately. There's no further update on that now, but yeah, weird. This season just continues to be weird, strange, bad. The vibes, I think it's just the vibes. The vibes. The hope is gone right now. Weird things are happening. We've even seen beat reporters like tweeting kind of negatively. Like, I think everyone's just exhausted. And it's, yeah, I don't want to get into a deeper conversation here because we're still very early in the season. And as much as some people might hate me saying this or it might annoy people, there is a lot of time to turn this thing around. So I'm going to save. I have some takes that I have hoped for a while wouldn't become true, but some are about players and certainly some are about some of the front office decisions and hirings in there, which I'm going to save until this thing is completely dead and gone and we're talking about trading every young guy, like, or where we're sitting at 5 and 30, but it's looking like it's going to get to that point soon. And I have some takes that, yeah, I've been keeping in the bank, but yeah, I appreciate everyone for tuning in. I hope this episode's been somewhat interesting. I feel like I'm just all over the place right now, as are a lot of Pistons fans. Feels like we're just constantly waiting for this news to come. Feels like, yeah, I don't know how to describe it. I have not felt like this with this organization in such a long time, since probably the 2016-17 season. But I've just never been this in tune and like kind of this like in tune with the organization and being so close to monitoring what is going on. Like, I've never felt this, like, feels like something's brewing. It's all I'm trying to say. I don't know what it is, but I feel like something's going to give at some point. And I hate to be negative, but it honestly feels like something big has to happen. And this is starting to feel like an ownership. It just, yeah, culture is, I don't know what is good and bad, what's right in this organization right now, just from a player personnel and kind of front office perspective. Things feel off, and it feels like the Pistons, unfortunately, felt like after his first 3 games, the Pistons were going to be the surprise team. But as always, the rebuilding teams around them in the Magic, the Rockets, and you can't even call the Thunder rebuilding, but those 3 organizations are all taking strides. The Magic have the number 1 defense in the league. The Rockets are 6-6 and have veterans surrounded with their young core. And then OKC, we don't even need to talk about them. They're like 10-4, and yeah, they're not even in. Pistons aren't even in their stratosphere anymore. So Pistons, unfortunately, once again, are the bottom of the barrel team in the NBA. And what's worse is this draft isn't particularly strong. They're a small market team. Can't make it. There's going to be no real sizable trade made for another 4 weeks. So we're just going to keep battling out. I'll keep churning these out. Sorry this episode went a bit long, but yeah, we just got to stick together, Pistons fans. So thanks for tuning in. If you're feeling so kind, hit that subscribe button, drop a comment below. Loved hearing everyone's thoughts after the last episode. Just vent, let it all out. If you don't want to chat in the YouTube comments, message me on Twitter, talk to me on Twitter. We've got to stick in this together. So appreciate you all. Please subscribe. Please drop a like. But until after the Pacers game, unless there's any news that comes out, unfortunately, I have to say, go Pistons.